August 9, 1989, a 2-3-year-old Canadian hockey player rents a snowboard at an Austrian ski resort, waves goodbye to a resort employee, and heads up the mountain alone. He is never seen alive again. His name is Duncan MacPherson. He was a first-round NHL draft pick. He had his whole career in front of him, and for 14 years no one knew what happened to him, until a glacier started melting and the truth began to surface. This is one of the most haunting, most mysterious, and most deeply unsettling stories in the entire history of professional hockey. Duncan MacPherson's story doesn't start on a glacier in Austria. It starts on the frozen outdoor rinks of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, where a kid from the Canadian prairies was turning into something special. Today, we're going to tell that story in full. The rise, the setbacks, the disappearance, the 14 years of silence, and the deeply disturbing truth that finally emerged from the ice. The rise. Duncan MacPherson was, by every account of anyone who knew him, a genuinely exceptional human being. Kind, generous, loyal, hardworking. The kind of person who lit up every room he walked into, and on the ice, he was a force. Playing defense for the Saskatoon Blades in the Western Hockey League, MacPherson was the kind of physically imposing, bone-rattling blue liner that NHL teams spent years chasing. The New York Islanders, fresh off the back of their 4 consecutive Stanley Cup dynasty in the early 1980s, saw exactly what they needed in him. In the 1984 NHL entry draft, they selected Duncan MacPherson in the first round, 20th overall. 20 overall. At 18 years old, a kid from the Saskatchewan prairies was a first-round pick of one of the most celebrated franchises in hockey history. The future looked limitless. The struggle. But professional hockey has a way of separating dreams from reality quickly. MacPherson spent his post-draft years not in the NHL, but grinding through the minor leagues. He played for the Springfield Indians in the American Hockey League. He suited up for the Indianapolis Ice in the International Hockey League. The NHL game never quite materialized. Injuries became a recurring problem. The body that had looked so imposing in junior hockey kept letting him down at the next level. By 1989, the New York Islanders had seen enough. They bought out MacPherson's contract and released him. For a lesser person, that might have been the end of the dream entirely. But Duncan MacPherson wasn't done. He had a plan. A new chapter. A completely different direction for his hockey life. He was going to Europe, the summer of 1989. In the summer of 1989, Duncan MacPherson packed his bags and headed overseas. He had accepted an offer to become the player coach for the Tayside Tigers, a semi-pro hockey team in Dundee, Scotland. He was due to arrive in Dundee on August 12th, but before Scotland, he wanted to take some time for himself, visit old friends scattered across Central Europe, see the sights, squeeze some life out of the summer before the new chapter began. There was a detail that made some people uncomfortable, even at the time. MacPherson had reservations about Ron Dixon, the millionaire entrepreneur backing the Scottish team. Something about the man gave him a bad feeling. Despite that unease, MacPherson pressed on. He eventually made his way to Austria, specifically to the Stubai Alps, a breathtaking stretch of glacier country in the Tyrol region. On August 9, 1989, he borrowed a car from a friend and drove to the Stubai Tal Resort, a ski area nestled at the foot of the famous Stubai glaciers. He rented a snowboard. A resort employee spoke with him that afternoon, a friendly, relaxed conversation. Then, they watched MacPherson head up the mountain alone, hoping to get some final runs in before the daylight faded. That was the last confirmed sighting of Duncan MacPherson alive. He never came back down. The disappearance. When MacPherson failed to show up in Dundee on August 12th, alarm bells immediately went off for his family. This was not a man who missed appointments. This was not a man who went dark without warning. Duncan MacPherson was responsible. Dependable. His mother Linda would later say they knew immediately from the very first missed check-in that something was terribly wrong. The MacPhersons began searching. 6 weeks after Duncan vanished, the borrowed car was found sitting in the parking lot of the Stubai ski resort, exactly where he had left it on the day he went up the mountain. Austrian police were called. The Canadian Consular Service was notified, and here is where the story takes a turn that would haunt a family for the next 2 decades. Neither the Austrian authorities nor the Canadian government offered meaningful help. The MacPhersons, Bob and Linda, middle-aged parents from Saskatoon, found themselves essentially alone, searching a foreign country, in a foreign language, for their missing son. They printed 2,500 missing person posters in 3 different languages. They distributed them across 4 different countries. They traveled to Austria themselves, repeatedly spending their own savings, chasing every lead they could find. In 1994, a glimmer of hope. A report of an amnesiac man in Austria thought to possibly be Duncan. That lead proved false, and then silence. For years, the discovery. July 18, 2003. 14 years after Duncan MacPherson walked up that glacier and never came back, a resort employee making a routine patrol spotted something unusual on the ski slope. A red glove. Sticking up out of the melting ice, the employee reached down to pull it out, thinking it was simply a lost piece of gear, and found a hand still attached to it. Duncan MacPherson's body had been lying frozen in the ice of the Schaufelferner Glacier in the middle of an active ski run for 14 years. His identity was confirmed by an ID card found with the remains. The MacPhersons, who had never stopped searching, never stopped believing, finally had their answer. Their son never left that mountain. But the question that replaced the question of where he was something much darker. How did he die? And why had the resort said nothing? The truth below the ice. Austrian authorities offered a straightforward explanation. Duncan MacPherson, they said, had simply fallen into a crevasse, an accident. Tragic but unremarkable. Of the kind that alpine environments have always claimed, but forensic experts weren't buying it. MacPherson's body showed catastrophic trauma. Arms, hands, and legs had been severed or amputated. The injuries were severe and specific, and to a Canadian forensic anthropologist named Miriam Nafte, who examined the case for CBC's Fifth Estate, they were deeply inconsistent with a simple fall into a crevasse. And then, there was the snowboard, still strapped to MacPherson's feet when found. The board had been cut apart in a clean, uniform pattern, exactly the kind of damage consistent with rotating machinery. Author John Leake, who spent years investigating the case and wrote the book Cold a Long Time, an alpine mystery at the request of MacPherson's parents, pieced together the most likely sequence of events. MacPherson had an accident on the slope. He injured his leg. He was lying on the mountain waiting for help on a day of dense, heavy fog. A snowcat, a grooming machine moving through that fog, ran him over. The driver didn't see him. And then, instead of reporting it, someone buried Duncan MacPherson in a shallow crevasse and said nothing for 14 years. The resort staff had been defensive from the very first questions. Local police showed little initiative. Records were missing or contradictory. Statements changed, and in a detail that cost the MacPherson family any chance of definitive forensic proof. Duncan's remains were cremated before a proper, independent examination could be performed. Whatever evidence his body might have contained was gone. The cover-up and the fight for truth. The MacPherson family refused to accept the official version of events. They had spent their life savings traveling to Austria 11 times in search of answers. Now they took their fight to the highest legal arena they could find. They brought their case to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, alleging that Austria had violated their son's right to life and the right to an effective remedy, claiming that Austrian authorities had taken active measures to prevent the truth from coming out. The court ultimately found that everything that could have been done had been done. The MacPhersons disagreed. Profoundly. As Linda MacPherson put it, "You're really taking on the whole Austrian government, and they have lots of time and lots of resources, and I think they just hope that we'll go away." It didn't go away, and the question of why the resort said nothing, why nobody came forward, why the official story shifted and changed, was explored by author Leake through the lens of something an Austrian friend told him. That in a small mountain valley, the highest good isn't truth. It's protecting the community, that a simple man who knows something will stay silent forever. Not out of malice, but out of fear of being cast out from the only world he's ever known. That explanation is either deeply human or deeply chilling, depending on how you look at it. No one has ever confessed. No charges have ever been filed. The case remains officially unsolved. Duncan MacPherson was 23 years old when he went up that glacier. He was a first-round NHL draft pick, a player coach heading to a new life in Scotland, a son, a brother, a friend who everyone who knew him described with the same words: kind, generous, loyal, hardworking. His mother, Linda, reflecting on everything, said something that is equal parts heartbreaking and quietly extraordinary. "I'm sorry you died so young, but I know you had a good life, and you died doing something you loved, and that gives me some peace." That peace didn't come from the Austrian government. It didn't come from the courts. It came from a mother who chose, after 36 years, to keep loving her son louder than she kept demanding answers, even as she never stopped doing both. A documentary about Duncan's death on the glacier was produced by filmmaker Biljana Perovic and aired on Austrian national television, finally telling the story with honesty and some measure of accountability. But the official record remains exactly where it has always been, unsolved. A glove sticking out of the ice, a body frozen for 14 years, and a family that never, not for a single day, stopped looking for the truth. Duncan MacPherson deserved better from the mountain, from the authorities, and from the history books. This is his story, and it deserves to be told.